When you think about the symbol that best represents Judaism, what comes to mind? Star of David. Thank you, Sylvia. We work together. Anything else? We have the Star of David. Shabbat candles, it's a great one. Menorah, I heard. Mezuzah. Torah, that's a good one. I've heard of that. Ten Commandments. The eternal light, or the tapestry, or the Ten Commandments? You're just pointing to those? Okay, I was just reading into what they were pointing at. So arguments can be made for all of these suggestions. Obviously, they're all Jewish symbols. But, since I have the bima this evening, I figured I would argue for one in particular. And that is the question mark. So there's no doubt that Jews love questions. We might say, "Where is God?" Or, "Can I have your challah recipe?" Not to mention all of the questions we have when studying Torah, as those of you who come at 8:45 a.m. on Shabbat mornings with Rabbi Strauss, we have a lot of questions. We might ask, why are there two creation narratives? Did the Exodus really happen? Did Moses exist? But our Torah also asks questions as well. One of the first questions in the Torah is found in Genesis, chapter 3, verse 9. It's the scene where Adam and Eve have just eaten from the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and they go off to hide because they feel like they might be in trouble because, that was the one thing God told them not to do, and they did it. And God calls out to them, "Ayeka, where are you?" Just one chapter later, in Genesis chapter 4, verse 9, God asks Cain, "Ayeka, where is your brother?" In both of these verses, God knows exactly where Adam and Eve are hiding, as well as Abel. So why even ask the question? Are there any ideas out there? Oh, there's one right there. I love that. To see if they're honest enough to really admit what it was that they did, or where they really are, or where Abel really is. So a rabbi that I used to learn with in LA, Rabbi Sharon Brous, she interprets ayeka, this question of where, as where is your spiritual self? Or even, how did you come to making this decision, to making this choice? This is the question we find ourselves asking every Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Who am I? Who have I been this last year? You might be wondering right now, speaking of questions, why is she talking about A, the book of Genesis when we're in Deuteronomy, and B, why is she talking about the high holidays when it's July? Fair questions, my friends. So why am I talking about these things? In this week's Torah portion, we find Moses asking the question. It's comprised of the same word, as the same letters as ayeka, but it has different vowels. Moses asks, "Echa esa levadi." You're going to love this. How can I bear alone the trouble of you, the burden and the bickering? That's what he's saying to the Israelite people. And while this question may be less existential than the one posed by God in Genesis, the rabbis connect this portion to the holiday of Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is the holiday that commemorates the many disasters that have fallen on the Jewish people, such as the destruction of both the first and second temples in Jerusalem, among many, many, many others. If you'd like to know some, Wikipedia is very helpful. When we gather as a community on Sunday afternoon at 4 p.m., we'd love to see you there, to observe this holiday as a community, we will read together part of the book of Lamentations. In Hebrew, though, it is actually called by the first word of this text, Echa, the same question Moses asks in this week's Torah portion. The book of Echa, Lamentations, is written as a theological and prophetic response to the destruction of the first temple. The writer has just witnessed the destruction of the first temple. This is not the destruction of the second temple. This isn't something that's already happened. It seems like the worst thing that could possibly happen. And it begins again, asking Echa, how did this happen? How could this happen? Or perhaps even, how did you let this happen to the people at the time? Historically, we know that the Babylonians destroyed the first temple in 586 BCE, and the Romans destroyed the second temple in 70 CE, again on Tisha B'Av. However, the rabbis of the Talmud, when retelling this story for generations to come, shifted the blame for these calamities from the Romans, who, at least as far as the second temple or the Babylonians went, they shifted the blame onto the Jewish people themselves, even though they weren't the ones doing the actual destroying. In the rabbis' retelling, the temple was destroyed because of something called sinat chinam, of baseless hatred. The people had stopped being kind to one another. The people had started hating one another. The people had forgotten the commandment that is repeated more often than any other in the Torah, to love your fellow. Because of this, the rabbis say, because of how horrible and hateful people were to one another, that's why the temple was destroyed. Another opinion, again, when we ask questions, we also have many answers. Another opinion given in the Babylonian Talmud argues that Jerusalem was destroyed only because the Israelites did not rebuke one another. The problem was not in how they treated each other, but they neglected to ask each other the question, Ayeka, or Echa, where are you? Why are you doing this? Who are you? Regardless of which explanation you are drawn to, whether it's that it was because of baseless hatred or because the Israelites were not holding each other accountable, I think the message is actually telling us that the temple had to fall in order to expose the dysfunction found within its walls. The Hebrew month of Av started last Shabbat, and again, Sunday evening, we will come to our temple observation of that holiday observance. But with it, as Rabbi Alan Liu in his book about approaching the High Holy Days, it's called This is Real and You Are Completely Unprepared, which I think is a very well-titled book for the High Holy Days. He argues that Tisha B'Av actually starts the process of teshuvah, of repentance. Tisha B'Av reminds us that we too need to tear down our walls, just as the walls of the temple fell. We too must become vulnerable enough to hold ourselves accountable for our actions. Why does Rabbi Liu think that we must start now? Isn't that what the 10 days of repentance are for, or even the month of Elul, the month preceding Rosh Hashanah? And the answer is yes, but also potentially Tisha B'Av. This holiday has a few things for us to use in our preparations for the High Holy Days, a preparation that, according to this approach, now spans over a sixth of the year. You're welcome. Tisha B'Av is a day of remembering recurring catastrophes, but it also gives us the opportunity to look within our own lives and our own repeating catastrophes, or the recurring cycles we find ourselves in year after year when we sit in the sanctuary on Yom Kippur, potentially repenting for the same thing that we may have been repenting for the year before. We repeat our cycles until we learn how to change them. Moses was hoping that the new generation of Israelites would not repeat the mistakes of their ancestors. And so in this week's Torah portion, he rebukes them. They were not the people that, sent the spies in and decided that it wasn't a good time to enter Israel, which really made God upset to the point where the Israelites had to wander for 40 years. This was the generation that was not in slavery. This was the generation that was going to be able to enter the promised land, and yet Moses is rebuking them. So just as Passover, the holiday commemorating our being freed from Egypt, occurs 7 weeks before Shavuot, the holiday commemorating the receiving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, so too does Tisha B'Av, the holiday remembering the destruction of the temple and brokenness in general, comes 7 weeks before Rosh Hashanah. The holiday celebrating creation And in the case of ourselves, we generally come here hoping for some recreation of ourselves. So what is the message here? Perhaps with the Passover Shavuot connection, it might be that in order to accept something in free will, one needs to be free. And with the Tisha B'Av and Rosh Hashanah connection, it could mean that in order to rebuild, as we will spiritually during the High Holy Days, and physically as we build our sukkah after Yom Kippur, we must first tear down and expose what is happening within our own walls, at the very least to ourselves, if not to others. During Tisha B'Av, we are forced to look back into the dark and ugly events of Jewish history. This act reminds us that we must begin the process of looking back into the dark and ugly events and behaviors of our own lives, to tear down the walls that we put up that allow us to ignore these parts of ourselves. Tisha B'Av is our reminder to break down our walls so that we can truly look into our hearts in order to open ourselves up to change, to being the change makers, to taking what is unique in you and building this world to a stronger place. In both of the scenes from Genesis that I spoke about at the beginning, with Adam and Eve or Cain, God actually asks a second question. So first we have Ayeka, where are you? And then God follows with Ma'asit or Ma'asita. What did you do? What have you done? Adam, Eve, and Cain need to take responsibility for their actions. They needed something to shake them and say, why did you do that? As we begin the book of Deuteronomy, the book that serves as a highlight reel of the Israelites' journey, we are reminded to ask ourselves these two questions. Ayeka, where are you? And Ma'asita, what have you done? So that we can ask ourselves in the future, Ma'aseh, what will I do? Who will I be? How will I mend relationships? How will I fight injustices I see in the world? What is it that's important to me? How will I show that through my actions and through my speech? So why is the question mark the symbol of Judaism? Judaism encourages questioning, perhaps because questions push us to define and refine who we are, to define and refine our values and how we express them in this world. And at the end of the day, if we better ourselves, it will enable us to partner with God in creating a better world. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will. And we say, Amen and